Chapter 4 The Cooler Killer, Birmingham, February 25th, 1985. Worker shot in restaurant. Hold up, dies. The assistant manager of a South Side restaurant died last night after being shot twice in the head early yesterday morning by a robber. John David, 49, of 2249 3rd Palace Northeast, was declared brain dead at 10:55 p.m. yesterday in Medical Center East after undergoing surgery earlier in the day. In addition to the bullet wounds, Davidson had also been severely beaten. Mike Bengoff, worker shot in restaurant, hold up dies. Birmingham Post-Herald, February 26, 1985. I don't know where I was the night John Davidson was murdered. I didn't spend my days developing alibis for my nights. I had never eaten at Mrs. Wilmer's Chicken and Biscuits in Southside, but on February 23rd, somebody robbed the restaurant and forced John Davidson into the cooler and shot him twice in the head. Someone took a son away from his parents and a husband away from his wife. There were no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no DNA. Anyone could have done it. The murderer walked away with $2,200. What is the price of a life? What is the dollar amount a man would trade his soul for? I don't know the answers to these questions. I've thought about the man, wondered just what it was that led him to such a desperate act. What must be have been thinking as he sat in the dark waiting to rob and to murder? Every desperate act has its price, but I don't know then that the person would pay the price was me. Where was I on the night John Davidson was murdered? I have no idea. Where was I? Asleep in my bed, laughing with Lester, eating with my mom, visiting a lady friend. My days and nights were pretty remarkable. I worked at a store, assembling and delivering beds 6 days a week. I had kept my promise to stay out of trouble, and while I can't say where I was or what I was doing on that night, I do know I was not out beating and robbing and murdering. I also know somebody got away with murder. Birmingham, July 3rd, 1985. My job at the Brass Works wasn't one I could keep long term because I just couldn't wrap my head around always having to work on a Saturday. Saturdays were for potlucks at church, barbecues with friends, running errands with my mom, or taking her fishing and college football. Our church didn't have any men in it, and it seemed like every Saturday they had car washes or building repairs that needed to be made, and they always asked for some men to help out. As much as I tried for over 6 months, I just wasn't happy working on Saturdays, and eventually it slowed. Monday through Friday, I worked as hard as I could, always showing up on time and giving it my best, but come Saturdays, it was like a switch flipped in me, and I knew I wasn't doing my employer justice. I made up as many excuses as I could to get my Saturdays off, and I may have even stretched the truth every now and then, but eventually it became clear that this job wasn't the job for me. Every Saturday, it was harder to be the kind of employee they needed. No hard feelings. I quit a couple weeks after my birthday. I left with no hard feelings and made plans to sign on with a company called Manpower, which provided temporary labor to businesses around Birmingham. I had just turned 29, and honestly, I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Sometimes it felt like life was more a process of elimination than a series of choices. I knew I didn't want to be a coal miner. I knew I didn't want to be in prison. I knew I wasn't cut out to be a deckhand on a tug hauling coal up and down the river. I knew I didn't want to work on Saturdays. I knew I didn't want to leave my mom on her own. But apart from those things, I just wanted to make a living, pay my bills, have a nice car to drive, and find a nice woman I could fall in love with and marry and have children with. I was hoping that woman would be willing to live at my mama's house, but I figured I would cross that bridge when the time came. Manpower wasn't going to be a whole lot of money, but it was something. I was optimistic that moving from business to business and doing different jobs would help me learn what it was I want to do in my life. You just never know who you might meet or what might be sparked. I had been out of high school 10 years, but I still loved to learn new things. I liked talking to different people and going to places I had never been before and seeing how they operated. I had a good head for business, and I thought about opening a restaurant where I could serve people the food my mama had been making for me so long. She taught me to cook everything she made. Her cooking lessons always begin with, "If it makes you happy, you'd better be able to make it yourself. I don't see no wife on your arm anytime soon." My mama had always had a way of getting her point across. She made me laugh. She kept me on the straight and narrow, and she never once rushed me to figure things out. She just loved me the same way she had loved me for as long as I could remember, absolutely and unconditionally. Restaurant manager found fatally shot. A 5-year employee of Compton D's was found fatally shot yesterday morning in the walk-in cooler of the restaurant in Woodland. He was an apparent robbery victim. Birmingham police said Thomas Wayne Vason, 25 of 11, Oak Street, Newcastle, died of a gunshot wound to the head. There were no signs of a struggle. Some money had been taken from the safe, but the amount was not known yesterday. Homicide Sergeant C.M. Quinn said there are similarities between Vason's slaying and the murder of an assistant manager at Mrs. Winner's Chicken and Biscuits restaurant in February, but Quinn said he did not know if the two slangs are related. We celebrate the 4th of July just like we did every year. The best barbecue you could imagine, friends from church and sweet tea by the gallon. There was no bigger holiday in Alabama than the 4th. You couldn't take a walk down the street without strangers inviting you in to eat something from their table. Fireworks, watermelon, and kids running around like grown-ups squirted them with water from a hose. We may have been separate throughout the years, but something about the holiday brought neighborhoods and people together like nothing else. We weren't black or white. We were Americans, and we laughed and played and clapped for the parade floats. And it was the one time of year it seemed like all of Birmingham fell in love with each other, and 1985 was no different. Gunny sack races and egg tosses and more food than you could imagine. My mom wore her best white hat and blue dress with a red piping at the sleeves. I remember sitting in some folding chairs with Lester and watching her laugh with the ladies from church, feeling a joy so big. I couldn't even contain it. I knew that in a couple of months I would be off parole and all those mistakes from my past would put me to rest. There was a special new girl I was seeing, Sylvia, and I hopeful that the manpower work I was going to sign on for tomorrow would lead to something bigger. I turned to Lester and said, "This holiday just feels like the Pledge of Allegiance." "Man, what do you mean?" So I tried to explain. You know, one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. Everything today feels like that. Hopeful, like justice and freedom and anything is possible, you know? I guess so. It kind of just feels like another hot 4th of July, but I see what you mean. What if next year one of us is getting married or I have a kid or who knows what? I stopped. Because in that moment, I felt such a love for Lester and for my mom and her gloves and her hat and for Alabama and for the hot days in July with sweet tea that cools you from the inside out that I actually was at a loss for words. "You fixin' to have kids anytime soon?" Lester laughed. "You never know," I said, swallowing a lump in my throat that had come up out of nowhere. "Just feels like change is in the air. I don't know." Lester looked up at the outcast sky and laughed. "Feels like thunder to me." Inslee, July 25th through July 26, 1985. I clocked into Bruno's warehouse at 11:57 p.m. I didn't mind working the night shift, and when the clock struck midnight, I stood in a group of about a dozen other temporary workers, ready to get my marching orders for the night. Bruno's was a large warehouse, and the temporary workers had to be checked in through a guard check outside, and then report to the supervisor. They kept a close eye on us, I guess because being temporary workers meant we might steal something or not work as hard. It never made sense to me. Temporary workers wanted permanent jobs, so if anything, we worked harder than regular employees. My assignments usually involved driving the forklift typically. I'd use the forklift to bring empty pallets to the back of the truck where they would get loaded with the merchandise by older workers. And then I'd take the load pallets to the high side, which was what we called the part of the warehouse where the racks were the tallest, and store them up the shelves. It wasn't rocket science, but it was kind of fun to drive a forklift. My shift began at midnight on July 26th. We would stand around for 15 to 10 minutes while the supervisor, Tom Dahl, checked us in and wrote down our names and handed our assignments. My first assignment was to use the forklift to get a pallet loaded with buckets and cleaning supplies and mops and drive that around to all the other locations where guys were working to be cleaning. That took about 10 minutes, and then the supervisor asked me to go up and clean the bathrooms and scrape all the gum off the bathroom floors. It was amazing why grown women and men were just throwing gum on the floor, but it wasn't my job to ask. My job was to scrape off all the gum and mop and bleach those bathrooms from top to bottom. Not my favorite kind of work, but it was work. I liked to do a good job no matter what it was. I finished that particular task around 2 a.m., got it approved by Dell, and then took my break for 15 minutes. After that, I worked outside separating out the broken pallets from the good ones, seeing which of the broken ones would be repaired and which ones were so badly damaged they couldn't be worth the time it would take to fix them. It was foggy that night. I couldn't even see any stars. But I was glad I had worn a sleeveless shirt because even at 3 a.m., it was in the mid-70s and humid. It felt like raining was gathering. Nothing more exciting happened that night. I had my lunch at 4 a.m., cleaned out under the dumpster, and called it a night. Birmingham, July 27, 1985. Robber shooting may be tied to murders. Police are investigating whether Friday morning's robbery shooting of a Besserman restaurant managers related to the murders earlier this year of two Birmingham restaurant managers. All three managers were shot in the head during late-night robberies at their restaurants, but the assistant manager of the Quincy Family Steakhouse at 1090 9th Avenue SW in Bessemer survived his wound, and police have questioned him. Sidney Smotherman of 3341 Berry Drive, Hueytown, was listed in good condition in Caraway Methodist Medical Center in Birmingham on Friday night, a hospital spokesperson said. Police said Smotherman was shot in the head in one hand. Bessemer Captain J.R. Pace said Friday that police originally believed one bullet had done all the damage to Smotherman, but that they now believe there could have been two shots fired. Pace said Smotherman also was injured in the chest, although the source of the injury was undetermined. All three robberies took place after the restaurants had closed and each manager was forced to the back of the establishments where they were shot. Police have worked since February trying to solve the robbery murder at Mrs. Winner's Chicken Biscuit at 737 29th Street South, in which John Davidson, 49 of Center Point, was shot twice in the head and left for dead inside the restaurant. Because of bloodstains in the rear of the restaurant, detectives believe Davidson, an assistant manager, was forced into the walk-in cooler and shot there. On July 2nd, Thomas Wayne Basin, 25, night manager of the Captain D's at 5901 First Avenue North, was found dead in the restaurant cooler when employees opened for business. Pace would not elaborate on facts of the Bessemer case, but read the statement Smotherman made to the police. According to Smotherman's statement and other Bessemer police accounts, the Friday morning robbery and shooting at Quincy's unfolded this way. At about 12:30 a.m., Smotherman and four other people left Quincy's in separate vehicles on their way home after the restaurant closed. Smotherman was alone in a 1985 Pontiac Fiero and stopped at a grocery store along the way. After leaving the grocery store, Smotherman said he stopped at the intersection of 9th Avenue and Memorial Drive and was bumped from the rear end by a back Chevrolet or Buick. When Smotherman stepped out of his car to check his damage, the driver of the sedan pulled a gun on him, told him to get back into the Ferrero, and the gunman joined him in the car. The gunman told Smotherman to drive to 4th Avenue and Memorial Drive, where he left the Ferrero parked on the side of the street and went to the gunman's sedan. The gunman drove Smotherman back to Quincy's, where he forced him to open the door and go inside. Once inside, the robber ordered Smotherman to open the safe and then pulled a plastic garbage bag from a trash can and filled it with the money. At that point, the gunman ordered Smotherman into the cooler, but Smotherman talked him out of it, saying it was too cold. The gunman then told Smotherman to go in the storage room, and as Smotherman turned around to do so, the gunman shot him in the head. Smotherman fell to the floor, where he purposely laid motionless until his assailant left. Once the gunman was gone, Smotherman made his way to the Motel 6 next to the restaurant and sought help. Smotherman described his assailant to police as black, 5'11", 190, with a mustache and wearing blue jeans and red checker shirt. Pace said Friday that his department has discovered Quincy's robbery with Birmingham detectives, but we are investigating our own incident down here, he said. Birmingham Homicide Sergeant Howard Miller, who is investigating Basin's murder at Captain D's, said he had talked with a Bessemer detective Friday morning, and we are working with Bessemer. Smotherman had worked at Quincy's for about 3 years, said his daughter, Mrs. Marty Hamilton of Atlanta. She said, as he began as a manager training at the restaurant. Mrs. Hamilton said her father was in very good condition and very good spirits Friday night. We all know he was lucky. It just wasn't his time to go, she said. We just hope they catch him, the gunman, and that this doesn't happen to anyone else. Burnwell, July 3rd, 1985. July is always hot in Alabama, even when it's cloudy out. So when my mother asked me to mow the lawn, I didn't want to do it. In fact, it was the last thing I wanted to do. I was thinking about seeing my girl Sylvia later, and I was thinking about the revival we were going to at church. The last thing I wanted to do was get all hot and sweaty cutting the grass. I had already washed my car, a sweet red Nissan that was put in Sylvia's name because I was still cleaning up the mess I made of my credit when I was younger. The heat was settling in, and all I wanted to do was drink something cool in the shade of my mama's living room. I'll cut the grass tomorrow, I said, settling down on the warm couch. She just looked at me in the quiet way she had that meant business. Now I'm trying my best to see how you get to. I'll cut it tomorrow for my telling you to cut it down. You don't raise 10 children on your own by putting things off until tomorrow. And all of us kids had grown up knowing that once you were told to do something, you rarely got out of doing it. But if anyone had a chance to sweet talk mama, it was me. Not today. I cranked up the old lawnmower and started running through Bible verses in my head. I had to pick something to recite later at church. I wanted to look good for both God and Sylvia. As I went back and forth across the front lawn, I finally settled on one saying I finally settled on one that seemed perfect for the day. Philippians 2:14 through 15. I knew it would make my mama smile to hear me read the beginning of the verse. Do all things without grumbling or disputing. I don't know what made me look up right then to see the two white men sitting on the back porch. They were staring at me and neither was smiling. I cut off the lawnmower as the rest of the verse ran through my mind. So that you will prove yourself to be blameless and innocent children of God, above reproach, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world. Anthony Ray Hinton, one man took a step toward me, yelling my name, and I noticed that both men each held a hand over the gun at his side. Police. I had no idea why there were two policemen on my mama's porch, but I wasn't afraid. We had always been taught if you haven't done anything wrong, you have no reason to fear, and certainly no reason to run. I hadn't done anything wrong since I'd gotten out, and I checked in regularly since I had paroled. There was nothing to be afraid of. I walked to the top of the driveway. We need to talk to you. They flanked me on both sides and sort of nudged me down to the driveway to the car. It was then that I felt a little tingle at the back of my shoulder blades, and my stomach felt like it does when you ride over the top of a hill real fast in a car. Am I going to jail? They patted me down and cuffed my hands behind my back. I didn't do anything, I said. My voice was a little loud, a little sharper than I wanted to be. One guy started to open up the back door of the car. What is this about? They will tell you when we get you to Bessemer. Can I go in and tell my mama that I'm leaving? Whatever this is about, I knew it would get cleared up fast. I hadn't done anything wrong. They walked me up to the side door, and I yelled for my mom. She opened the door, and the three of us took a step in. They arrested me. Take me to jail. Don't worry, I didn't do anything. Don't worry, I said it fast because I could see the confusion on her face, and I didn't want her to start yelling at the police or to start crying. Just like that, they turned me around and walked me back to the car. A sergeant named Colt introduced himself and read me my rights. Is that your car? The other man pointed at my red Nissan. Yes, my girlfriend leased it from me. It's in her name, but it's my car. Do you mind if we search it in your bedroom? I didn't mind. Maybe that would get these cuffs off of me and I could avoid a trip to jail for no reason. Sure, I want you to. Please search them both. The sooner they searched, the sooner they could get me out of here, and I could finish cutting the grass and get the revival and Sylvia. I knew my mom would have probably helped them search my room. She wouldn't want